For years, the little house at the edge of town stood in silence. Its paint had peeled with time, and the garden that once blossomed with roses had long surrendered to weeds. Inside lived Mary, a woman in her late 60s who had grown accustomed to the rhythm of loneliness. Her children had moved away, one to another state, one to another life. And her husband had passed in the quiet of one winter night. Friends faded, neighbors changed, and so Mary spent her days with the hum of the radio and the creak of the rocking chair that echoed through empty rooms. People in town sometimes said, "She's strong, she doesn't need anyone." But strength, Mary knew, wasn't the absence of pain. It was simply the endurance of it. One autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled across the road and the wind carried the scent of burning wood, Mary lit a candle and set it by the window. It was her quiet ritual, a way of remembering her late husband. She never expected anyone to notice. But that night, footsteps came up her path, slow, steady, deliberate. When she opened her door, she saw them. A towering man with broad shoulders, his long dark hair braided, and beside him an elderly man leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane. They were Apache, their presence commanding yet humble, as if they carried centuries of stories in their silence. "We saw your light," the younger one said, his voice deep but gentle. "My father is tired." "Could we rest here just for a while?" Mary hesitated. It had been years since anyone had knocked on her door, let alone strangers of such striking presence. Yet there was something in their eyes, an unspoken plea and a dignity that disarmed her suspicion. She stepped aside. "Please come in." They entered quietly, the older man settling into her chair with a sigh of relief. The younger one, his son she assumed, thanked her with a nod. She brought them warm tea and bread, embarrassed at how little she had to offer. For a long while they said little, only sipping, resting, letting the silence grow comfortable. Then the elder spoke, his voice frail but steady. "You live alone," he said, not as a question but as though he could see through her walls. Mary lowered her eyes. "Yes? Alone." The elder looked at her, then at his son, and a strange softness filled the room. No one should carry life alone. Not at your age. Not at any age. Something in those words pierced Mary's heart. She had grown used to her solitude, but to hear it spoken aloud by a stranger, it was like someone acknowledging a wound she had tried to pretend wasn't there. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden, embarrassing. She turned away, but the younger man reached out, his massive hand hovering near hers, not touching but close enough for her to feel the warmth. He leaned forward, whispering, "You'll never be alone again." At first, Mary thought it was kindness, the sort of thing polite people say. But in the days that followed, the father and son returned. Sometimes they brought food, simple stews or cornbread. Sometimes they brought firewood stacked neatly by her porch. Sometimes they brought nothing at all, only their presence. The younger one introduced himself as Tahoma, and his father was Chief Nietzsche, one of the last of his people who still remembered the old ways. Mary found herself laughing again, something she thought she had forgotten. She listened to Nietzsche's stories of rivers that once ran free, of stars used for guidance, of battles fought not just with weapons, but with the will to keep identity alive. She listened to Tahoma speak of honor, of protecting those who could not protect themselves, of a deep belief that every life, no matter how quiet or forgotten, mattered. The townsfolk began to notice. "Who are those men always visiting Mary?" some asked. "Why are they helping her?" But Mary paid no mind. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a widow, not as an old woman left behind, but as someone worth sitting beside. One snowy night, the power went out across town. Darkness blanketed everything, and the cold crept into Mary's bones. She tried to light her fireplace, but her hands trembled too much. Just when despair began to rise in her chest, she heard a knock. Opening the door, she found Tahoma, snowflakes glistening on his long braids, and behind him, Nietzsche wrapped in a thick blanket. Without a word, they entered, carrying logs, blankets, and a lantern. Tahoma lit the fire, his strong hands steady where hers faltered. Nietzsche hummed an old Apache song, low and soothing, filling the silence with something ancient and comforting. As warmth spread through the room, Mary sat back and realized this was not charity. This was family, chosen not by blood but by something deeper. In the days that followed, Mary's house transformed. The garden once wild bloomed again under Tahoma's care. Nietzsche carved her a new rocking chair, saying the old one had carried too many lonely nights. Laughter returned to her kitchen. And though she was well into her 60s, Mary found herself walking taller, speaking brighter, as if her heart had been watered back to life. But the true turning point came one spring morning. Mary was tending her flowers when she tripped on a stone and fell hard, pain shooting through her hip. Fear gripped her. What if no one found her? But before panic consumed her, she saw him. Tahoma had been working nearby, and in moments he was at her side, lifting her gently, carrying her inside as if she weighed no more than a child. He stayed by her bed, his father chanting softly by the window, prayers that spoke of healing, of strength, of togetherness. Mary wept, not from the pain, but from the overwhelming realization that she was not abandoned. The words Tahoma had whispered, "You'll never be alone again," were not a passing kindness. They were a promise. As weeks turned into months, Mary became woven into the rhythm of their lives, just as they became part of hers. She celebrated their traditions. They honored hers. On summer nights, they shared stories under the stars. On winter mornings, they shared coffee by the fire. And every time Mary looked at the faces of her two unexpected companions, she saw not strangers, but a family the universe had sent her when she needed it most. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in hues of crimson and gold, Mary stood with them by her garden. Her voice trembled with gratitude. "I thought my life was ending in silence, but you gave me back more than I could ever ask for." Nietzsche placed a wrinkled hand on hers. The Creator knows when a heart is too heavy to carry itself. That's when he sends others to share the weight. Tahoma looked at her, his dark eyes steady and full of warmth. "You'll never be alone, Mary, not now, not ever." And in that moment, beneath the fading light of day, Mary realized something extraordinary. Family is not only the people you are born to, it is the people who choose to walk into your life and stay. Her little house was no longer silent. It was alive, with laughter, with kindness, with the unbreakable bond between a lonely woman, a giant Apache, and his wise old father. And for the first time in years, Mary did not fear the days ahead. She embraced them, knowing she would walk them not in solitude but in love.